welcome to the 252 panel. We're gonna get this train back on schedule. Welcome everyone to the Growing Consumer Opportunity in K12. I'm Michael Cohen, partner at GSV, and I'm thrilled to be here with such a wonderful group of entrepreneurs that are really kind of driving innovation and traction, and I think a lot of exciting things in and around the consumer opportunity in K12. We've got folks online, offline, coding, CS, you name it. I mean, we could talk about without school. But without getting into kind of real introductions and folks and hopefully see everyone's names on the screen, I would just like to open it up with kind of, how did we get here? If you think back to the first ASU GSV Summit, no one was talking about the consumer opportunity in K12. So without it being a commercial for each of your companies, just maybe open it up by just, what has happened and why are we here today talking about the opportunity ahead of us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question because I think that the opportunity has always been there, and it's been more of a question of how visible it is to other folks who make noise about it, that kind of thing. But for us, if I think back to the education experiences that were really important for me personally, a lot of it was actually not as part of my regular school day. I did Kumon, I did all of those different things, and so I think what we're seeing now is essentially it's actually becoming a conversation that's more public, but that demand has always actually been there.
Yeah. I think a lot of times consumer behavior ends up kind of coming into play where it solves a problem, right? And I think with a lot of K-12 education and education more broadly, you have B2B businesses that are kind of disrupted by consumer patterns or consumer behavior. So parents in this case are kind of bummed out, right, at what they're getting in terms of the actual product and experience within schools. And so rather than wait on the sideline and wait for the system to change and get better, they are kind of taking it into their own hands. We were out at the Lego Idea Conference last week, and there was some research that was being presented about the percentage of parents who are thinking about their kids' education as traditional, in the way that they had education. And I think it was something like 7% of parents thought that the education would actually be very predictable, and it's the great majority of people who realize we're at a time now where I need to kind of take this education into my own hands. If I'm going to help my kids, I need to figure out a way to supplement or to bolster or to get involved in the community in order to help, because the regular system isn't cutting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And what I've seen is really this kind of focus on the whole child as well, in that this shift from the expectation that the state or the government is going to take care of the education of your kids for you, and that is all you need to be doing, to no, they're not doing a good enough job, and I'm really thinking outside the boxes, not just getting higher test scores, but to really making my child someone who is an active participant in their community and in their lives, and that really focuses on more than just the traditional standardized tests and the education to get good scores. And I'm sure you have seen very similar things.
100%. And the big trend that I see, which I think is driving this, is that millennial parents grew up with the internet and have seen the disruption in their own work and life. And as a result, this group has different expectations about what their kids are going to need to learn and how. And I think I saw the stat, 82% of new births in the US are with millennial parents. This is a massively growing demographic. And that's part of the reason I founded Outschool. A lot of it was from my own personal experience of learning outside the normal school system. I was very fortunate that both my parents were teachers and bought me a computer when I was age 5. And I had an amazing regular education in the UK, which I'm sure opened up many doors. But when I look back at the experiences that really were impactful for my career and my life now, it was that. And as a result, I think all of us have approaches to consumer education, which really plays that need.
And I think the experiential part too is what I find fascinating, in that what I see in the millennial trend too is people value experiences way more than material things. I think that segment is growing and growing. And that's what we're all doing, is providing experiences that enrich people's lives rather than a trinket or a toy, right? That they can play with for a couple of months and then throw away.
Yep. And Matt, you just touched on it, and before we came on stage, Amir and I were sharing, trading war stories. He's a relatively new parent. He looks remarkably fresh for having a 5-month-old.
Amazing.
And my 3-year-old and 1-year-old, keep me on my toes. But when we think about experience, how does experience for those of us that are kind of parents on the stage, how does that impact your approach to actually building your own companies, but also evaluating other players in the market?
That's a great question. I mean, I explicitly founded OutSchool because I wanted, it was a service that I wanted for my own kids. I mean, my 5-month-old is a bit young. We start at 3 years old. I think a lot about what I want for my kids' learning, and I think a lot about what he's going to need for the future. And one thing I can say for certain is that the future is uncertain, and that the idea that just getting good test marks and getting to a good college is going to be enough seems laughable to me. I got good grades in school. I loved it. I went through that system. But I just don't think that is the only thing that kids need to really thrive. I think that we need to take a far broader view of the kind of skills that kids need to learn. Whole child is an expression that is widely used. I think it's really important that our product and our system adapt in a very serious way. Otherwise, we're going to be not preparing our kids in the way they really need. And that's why at OutSchool we've taken the approach of letting teachers be creative and not just offering classes in the core curriculum, but offering classes like learn architecture through Minecraft. 10 different classes about cats, everything from a vet teaching about cat anatomy to kids sharing their stories about their pet at home. Things that people might consider to be falling into like edutainment. But I don't see that. I see kids sharing their stories and exploring their interests beyond the normal curriculum and finding agency by selecting their learning paths.
And what I love about this too is, it's called the growing consumer and the opportunity in K12, and you just said 3 years old is where you start. That's before K. I know we focus on, reading and interactive reading, getting parents started reading with their kids, as early as possible. Even 5 months is good. And I think what we're seeing in this consumer opportunity that is continuing to grow is that it starts earlier, right? You can actually touch and engage way earlier before they get into traditional education and traditional school systems. And that's what I find really exciting too.
Yeah, Tinkergarten story is a little bit interesting in the sense that my wife and I have three daughters. I co-founded with my wife, and we actually started the company even before we had kids. So it wasn't the traditional story of we have kids, we've become enlightened, and now we need to solve the problems. We actually had two pretty different careers. I was in education and technology, consumer technology. And I was kind of seeing the problem at the other end, which is I was trying to hire a lot of people for startups. And as you were bringing people out into the workforce, you actually experience kind of a rigidity around people's ability to problem solve in ambiguous situations, and where they're going to be changing jobs so frequently and working with distributed teams. My wife, who was in a classroom and then was an administrator in a school, was noticing the same trend with early learning, right, in her elementary schools. And it was this like common pattern that we kind of triangulated on and said, geez, if kids are growing up in a world where things are very, very rigid and predefined, where does that leave us if they don't have an opportunity for the kinds of childhood elements that we had when we grew up? So things like being able to go outside, which people are doing 50% of the time. Kids are doing 50% of the time than their parents did right now. Or just playing and giving your kids the ability to just kind of mess around and take risks and break things and so forth. And so it was these kinds of motivations that even before we had children, we said to ourselves, where is these trains kind of heading if we're kind of raising a generation of kids that have these types of patterns and don't have the supports to do it? And it was that kind of motivation that kind of got us fired up.
I think maybe I have a bit of a contrarian view than, So what I saw when I was growing up is actually one of the biggest disadvantages that I had is that I didn't start coding early enough. And that's actually why we founded Junie, because I didn't code until I got to Stanford and I was incredibly behind. Yeah. And there, I think, are also parents who want to know what's best and what's next, and they want a trusted advisor for that. And that's what we do for parents. And I think that choice is a great thing as well, and building a whole child as well. And then there are other things where, you know, coding is becoming literacy for a lot of people, and they need to start early, they need a good foundation. And the way that you teach them is really important, right? So we don't use any template code. The idea is that you can do problem solving from the ground up on your own, and that's incredibly important. But at the same time, you know, it's part of the reality, I think, nowadays in terms of what kids need to learn. And that's why folks, you know, are looking for those kinds of solutions as well.
And Vivian, so I want to key in on a word you just used, which is choice. That in this day and age, you can go online, and whether it's CS or literacy or, I guess, potpourri, which is kind of how you described all the different content available on OutSchool, which is really kind of meeting the learner where they want to learn. As you think about choice, and when I think about choice, I think about business models, and when I think about business models, I think about, particularly in consumer, free. And across the stage, I don't think at this point anyone has a free offering yet. And when you think about free, that lends itself to access, right? So as you think about the trade-offs in terms of, particularly whether it's in consumer models where free has worked, and it's been that kind of tip of the spear to a large network effect business, how do you balance, and how are you thinking about free and access and accessibility in terms of having great product and driving impact and scale?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I think you know, the way that we've looked at it is that getting access to every student is a priority for us. We can only start somewhere, and where should we start? And so for us, it's definitely been working with kids who are highly motivated, with parents who are highly motivated, and the price point does reflect that for now. But I think that there's a lot of ways that, you know, I think OutSchool has done an amazing job, and all these companies have done an amazing job of pooling that demand, getting that to more students faster, using software to actually deliver great curriculum to students everywhere. And yeah, it's a tough conversation to have, because I think there were a lot of companies that went out with the access first and then find a business model later mindset, and you know, a lot of those companies aren't around anymore. So you know, it's a tough decision to make.
Yeah, I mean, I totally support what Vivian's saying here, which is that you make different decisions as a company, you know, based on the business model at different stages in the business. And in order for any of these companies to be sustainable, right, it's figuring out how to drive revenue and how to drive, you know, kind of recurring business. And we made a similar decision with Tinkergarten in the sense that we knew from the beginning we were going to be charging for the classes and generating direct-to-consumer revenue. That doesn't mean that that's the beginning and the end of everything that we do and the way that we serve customers. It means that that's, you know, kind of the sustainable, repeatable pattern that we can count on. So we have an approach whereby our content and our curriculum is actually made available, kind of open. So you can go on to tinkergarten.com and get any activity that's being taught in the class for free. So literally, you don't have to come and pay us for a class at all. You can go on to the website right now. You can get the instruction, the DIY activities, and you can start doing this with your kids right now. And we also have a conversation that we generate with parents around that. So we're sharing information about child development and about your kids' learning and so forth. I think the reason why people make the decision to go and join a group and join a class has a lot to do with the community elements of what we do, right? So there's a different, and we think a richer experience when you do this among a group of people who are also doing it with their kids. There's a lot of benefits to the children to be together in terms of peer learning and interaction that they get, socialization. We talk a lot about social and emotional skills, and some people group those as soft skills. I think there's nothing soft about those skills. It's actually the stuff that put people like this on the stage, and you know, I mean, this stuff is fundamental to if you want to thrive in a society. So these are the kinds of things that you can do, you know, in an environment where you're grouped and you're enrolled in a class.
Yeah, I guess I think we're a little bit different in our kind of approach and our business model philosophy, where Our product is free to the consumer. It's completely free. They have to have the book in one way, shape, or form, but they can get it from the library. And we did that for the points that you kind of raised, in that we want access. We want people to be able to use it because we're all about getting kids excited to read. And that should be available to everyone. But I think it is about the creative business models that can still make you thrive. It's not that we give it away free and don't make any money. It's just about finding the right niche for you and for us, for your company, as to what is going to achieve, the biggest growth, the biggest scale, the biggest impact in the quickest amount of time. And there's lots of different ways to do that. So we really kind of took a shift too. When we started our company, we thought we were going to sell subscriptions, $5 a month, access to the platform, and that it was going to be a pure consumer model, and realized very quickly that we were the pinch point in that situation as far as content, as far as access, as far as offering. So we actually, a few months ago, really shifted away from the consumer to get revenue and really opened up our technology, which is all low latency voice synchronization for media and entertainment. That's, in a nutshell, what our thing is. And are licensing it to different entities, to different businesses who have completely different models across the board. But the goal is always the same of access and creating a way that we can make sure that we're around in a couple of years, right? And for 10, 20 more years to come.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, access is really, really important to us. And as a marketplace, there is a balance that we need to strike. So OutSchool's a marketplace. Our teachers are teaching our classes live over video chats, and they need to be paid. So our role is to balance that, to try and make it as simple as possible for teachers to offer these classes at a price point which gets them paid and allows them, most people who possibly can, access to them. And I think there's a couple of things we've really thought a lot about in our model to enable a lower price point. The main thing is that the classes are in small groups. So unlike one-to-one interaction, our parents can pay less per child in class, and our teachers can earn more. So for example, we have violin classes that are priced at $10 per student, whereas locally they might be $50. And that's a really key point in the group, because small groups make offering these classes at that price point really financially viable for teachers, and they also make great engaging learning experiences for the kids, because they learn from each other as well as from the teacher. So those are the really important parts of our model that support access. We've started a direct-to-consumer marketplace. I hope in the future that we can work with governments and with foundations and even corporate sponsors in order to be able to offer some of these classes for free in particular topics to students.
And I think that's a common theme that I keep hearing. It's like, even if you have a consumer model, right, you need to find some nuggets, right, that still provide access, that still provide an introduction at a low price point or an affordable price point, regardless of what you're doing.
And speaking of nuggets, and to go from the minutia of a nugget to the scale of a marketplace, how do you think about network effects and how important they are to each of your respective businesses?
Well, we're huge on network effects. That's exactly what we do as far as our product is about reading and making reading fun, and so we really try and get the teachers involved, right, first, because they're the ones that the parents go to for advice, for tips, for lessons, and how to enrich and engage their child. And when I think of network effects, I really think of bringing together the parent and the teacher in different scenarios and systems. So we really try and we actually focus at the top of the funnel to the ed tech teachers who train other teachers, because then they can go and show all the other teachers, and then the teachers show the kids, and then the kids show the parents, and you can really get that viral effect by bringing those two systems together of school, traditional education, and the at-home alternative education.
And when we think about network effects and learning from the past, and Brian, your background at Yahoo and Audible, two of the largest network effect businesses in the world, what lessons have you taken from that experience and brought them to Tinkergarten?
One of them is that network effects are really hard. I think a lot of people will talk about wanting network effects and wanting to build network effects in, or network effects are going to be the initiative this year. But network effects really start with like some fundamental thing in your product that is just inherent in it. It's the reason why your product exists. It's the reason why somebody, without you doing anything and without you having an initiative, people just want to share it or give it to somebody else. So I think the biggest lessons that I've taken out of some of the older days at Audible and Yahoo, having failed at this in a bunch of different ways, is you've really got to start with the quality of what you're delivering, and if you can do that in a way that without you having to do anything is something that people want to give to somebody else, you're at least onto the right idea. Then of course there are some mechanics around how you can perpetuate that and go for it. But I think in a lot of these businesses that are building marketplaces or creating networks, having some incentives in place for people to be able to do it. If the product gets better with more people doing it, that's usually a pretty good sign that you're onto the right idea.
I thought it was crazy too this past, just in the past 2 weeks. For us, teachers love to talk. And what I found crazy was just go look on Twitter. There was a big Google education conference, and there was like 3 teachers that did a presentation on us. I had no idea. I just found out about it from Twitter. Nice. But that's what you're talking about. And, that's what you want to see. And then my job is, well, how do I make that happen? 1,000 times X. To keep happening. But they kind of have to do it organically first, right? In order for you to really understand, is this something that can have a network effect or not? Because if they don't organically do it, you can put a ton of effort and energy into it, but it's never going to grow and scale in the way that you want it to unless they do it organically.
Yeah, there's that blog post on superhuman email. Have you guys seen this one? About, it's about if your users actually love your product or not, and the easiest question to ask them is how disappointed they would be if they couldn't use your product anymore. And if you're above like 40% and on the fact that people would be very disappointed, you have product market fit. And I think that's the most important thing. And then after that, you can add the little hooks in to like give referral credits or whatever have you. But if you don't have that nugget, then it's very hard to scale that up.
Yep. And speaking of product market fit, and you're all well funded. Some of you have announced large rounds in the past couple of weeks. Others are making their way through the financing conversations. But as you kind of thinking about validating product market fit, right? So kind of having the tiger by the tail, right? When in each of your respective business models or businesses have you reached that tipping point where you kind of feel like it's working? And what was that kind of signpost along the way that said, we're going to double down?
Yeah, for us, looking at the repeat rate, how often do learners come back week after week, and how often parents are purchasing? Is this just a one-time thing, or do parents really find that their kid is enthralled? And we knew we hit that point last summer when we saw our referral rates and attendance rate just skyrocket compared with what we saw in MOOC. So we've now had 25,000 parents enroll their kids in out-of-school classes, which is great. And I think it actually relates to the question on network effects, because one challenge with a network effects business is the network effects work against you when you're small, because you haven't yet got the value of a big community. And in a marketplace, you need a certain number of teachers in order to have supply for the parents to want to buy the classes. And it was a very, very tangible point when that happened. And now we have the flywheel where the more teachers there are on our platform offering their time and their creativity to the classes, the more value there is for families, and the more they keep coming back. And vice versa, the more families there are, the more classes teachers can teach, the more supplemental income they can earn. So for us, that was the main point: the repeat rate and the level of scale to unlock the network effect.
Yeah, I think this is going to apply for everybody here. That retention is it. We're education. Education is not I learned something once and then I'm not going to learn anything again, right? And so I think for each of our businesses, it's retention, right? And for us, we knew it when our average reads per week went above 3, right? That said, oh my gosh, they're doing this on a habitual basis. This isn't, oh, I just found it, I enjoyed it once, and then I'm done. I continue to read over and over and over and over again with different books, even this or the same book. But getting that level of retention for us, that was the level of product market fit that we were looking for. And that's what said, oh, we got to go all in here, because that is exactly what you want to see is a change in habitual behavior, right?
Yep. Yeah, for us, the first kindergarten class was in 2012, and it was that kind of confluence of problems that we were trying to solve for, which helped us to do the first class, which is in Brooklyn and in a park there. And I think it was pretty early on there where we had the concept, and we knew that in order to scale this to any zip code anywhere, that you would need to have a platform in order to facilitate that. We did some testing, at that point around the country to say, this is starting to grow within our local community here in an urban environment. Is this an urban thing? Is this a New York thing? And even though as an entrepreneur at that point, I was thinking to myself, absolutely, my gut tells me this thing could be anywhere on the planet, immediately. You really have to, I think, go through the paces in terms of determining whether or not you've got a universal idea here. When we started to notice the pattern, particularly with recruiting leaders, where any place we went to in any parent community, when we said things to people like, would you rather your kids have a little bit more time outdoors? Are you concerned about the increasing amount of screen time with your children? Is the notion of getting together with families in a community to help learn collectively together, are these ideas that matter to you? No matter where we went, if it was rural, suburban, urban, the same exact pattern existed, which is somebody in that community would say, you know what, this is a great idea, I want to be a leader, or I know who the leader is, and they would @ and off we go. And that was the point at which we sort of figured this is a product market fit. Now we got to do everything else that you need in order to make a business stand up.
And from product market fit to challenges, what's been the hardest decision you've had to, or biggest obstacle so far you've had at Juni Learning?
Ooh, give me the tough one.
Well, we can all share it.
No, I mean, I think honestly, access is one of the ones that we struggled the most with. We work with amazing folks. I actually was talking to one of our parents who lives in a ice fishing village in Alaska, and that's when I knew that we also had hit some critical mass, which was amazing. But unfortunately, we're not able to serve every student because of our price point, and I think that's one of the things that we've always talked a lot about, what we want to do next and offering scholarships, but sort of like the timing of that in the business has been something tough for us to figure out.
Yeah, for us, we've got this network of 2,000 teachers now who are in all 50 states and are continuing to grow as we see hundreds of applications a day now for the people who want to do this work. For us, there's this balance between the consistency and quality of the product, so making sure that we can continue to deliver that, but making sure that it's also unique enough to the individual. At the end of the day, it's them who is the facilitator, it's the community that matters, and we've got geographic differences, we have cultural differences, and these are the kinds of things that we really celebrate and try and support. And trying to balance that with making sure that you can still deliver high quality consistency is a good challenge for us.
God, I have so many challenges. But the biggest thing for us, I guess, is more, and this is probably fairly generic to people, where you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And for us in particular, we invented a technology that is kind of enabling. You can do a whole bunch of different things. So we could do advertising content. We could do, children's content. We could do horror story. I mean, whatever it is that you wanted to do with the tech, you can do. Clearly, as a startup, we can't do it all. And so it was really, I think our biggest challenge is, and still, is finding that right thing for us, that we are the experts at, tripling down on that, and making sure that we are not the pinch point to scale in whatever it is that we do.
I'll call out a couple of challenges. I think we had to overcome quite a few product and technology challenges just to get our format working. So our classes take place over video chats in small groups. So you both have the challenge of building a classroom to enable that kind of interaction, and also the challenges of kind of coordinating and make sure you get the right kid in the right class at the right time. And it's not just a regular marketplace where there's a buyer and a seller. You need to actually try and get a group of kids together with a teacher. So that took a lot of product work to get right. And then this I think is going to be an ongoing challenge for a marketplace like ours, quality control and policies. Because we don't want our product to turn into a free-for-all like YouTube. We curate this marketplace. It's not completely open. It's really important when you're talking about kids learning that we background check all our teachers, make sure that everyone is qualified to teach the subjects they teach, figure out policies around sensitive subjects where you might have a higher standard required for the qualifications of the people teaching it. And it's endless, and we take our role of being in the middle of that moderation extremely seriously. And I think that's really important for technology platforms, as we've seen by the controversies going on right now about social media and the idea of policing content. We very much take responsibility for the quality of the class on our platform, and that's an important thing we built into our business model.
And speaking of technology and going from technology to recommendations and curation, how do you think AI is going to impact OutSchool?
Great question. At our core, we are selling human interaction, and we don't think that parent demand for human interaction is going to go away. So I think that AI is going to really kind of supercharge teachers and really give them incredibly exciting tools. Everything from grading to automatically creating quizzes to detect where a learner's at. So I think it's going to be a real big productivity enhancer. But individual teachers aren't going to be training their own machine learning algorithms. It requires technology platforms to provide those tools for them, and we intend to provide those for our teachers. And of course, there's a lot of scope for using machine learning in things like content moderation and quality control, and providing coaching and suggestions to teachers. So we don't see it at all as kind of a threat to our business. We see it as a kind of a superpower.
Anyone else thinking about AI?
I look at it from just a recommendation content perspective for us. We really kind of focus on the creative, and that's kind of what makes it special. So I'd hate to see a time when AI takes over the creative. Just from a human perspective, I think that's not a good situation for us to be in as a society. But I think anytime, and I think this goes across the board here, if you have a content offering, whether it's a class, whether it's a book, whether it's anything like that, it's about making sure you touch the right person with the right information that they most likely want quickly, right? Because you have to get their attention soon. So I see, and we are working on different things to make sure that if you download our app and come into the system, kind of like a Netflix recommendation engine, that you are seeing what you are likely most interested in and then can find everything else, right? Because if you're the curation, you got to do the best job of curating.
I'm incredibly excited about AI for us. And I think that's because we have some more constraints around the problem. We develop all of our own curriculum, we hire the instructors, so we have a lot more ownership over that, and we're able to standardize a lot more of it. We sort of do a very rudimentary already, learning in the sense that any feedback from the instructors goes immediately into the curriculum, that kind of thing. And I think it'll be similar with OutSchool, where you provide recommendations to the instructors on notes they can leave after class and things like that. So yeah, it's exciting.
Cool. And as youth, and I want to be mindful of time here. We've got a few minutes left, but one of the things I'm most excited by is a panel we're having on Wednesday where we are going to have 5 learning and talent unicorns on stage for the first time at the summit in history. So as you now think through the growing consumer opportunity in K12, is there a unicorn opportunity here, and I guess, if not your company, who do you think it's going to be?
Hey, you're looking at 4 future
Yeah.
This is the
unicorns
panel.
right
What
here.
are
I
you
don't know.
talking
This is our
Yeah.
unicorn
Yeah.
panel.
Wait till we get
Yeah.
ASU GSV
Yeah.
15.
No, I'm incredibly excited. I think people always ask me what the market size is and like, are you afraid of the competition? And I think it's amazing. I mean, like people come to us because they've heard of you guys, right? And like even like Code.org sends a bunch of folks to us, and you know, it's been an amazing time because if you expand the pie for everyone, there's going to be an option for way more students. So yeah, I'm incredibly excited. I hope it's all of us.
No, I mean, it's, you know, we're obviously incredibly bullish. I mean, we've been staring at that strategy and plan for many, many years. And, you know, just this past week, we announced, you know, our Series B. And the new investor, who is a consumer investor, is very much, you know, also excited about that larger opportunity. And I think, you know, the reason is when you've got a concept and an idea that can be universal, that is able to kind of circumvent some of the other kind of calcification within the system, and you can kind of circumvent things like sales channels just to go direct and to be able to sell broadly and sell it and package it in many, many different ways. You can imagine the way that, you know, a business like Tinker Garden can start to spread out and grow. So anyhow, I'm bullish.
Good. Awesome.
And congrats, by the way, because Katzenberg is a great addition, I'm sure, to your team. That's going to be fantastic. But yeah, no, I think we all have the potential. And what I think about the most is also, we're here in the US, and the consumer opportunity in this segment across the world is very different than it is here in the US. Like, you know, Asian markets and countries outspend, you know, 8 to 1 what parents in the US currently spend on their kids in the form of education. And we're catching up. And so what I see here in that marketplace in the US is only growing, and it's not shrinking in the Asian countries either. Yeah. So it's just a bigger and bigger opportunity. The pies are getting bigger and bigger, and you know, the consumer is willing to spend more and more. So to me, that's a great alignment of you know, different factors converging all at the same time, which makes me really excited.
Yeah, and I'll come back to the trend I spoke about at the start, which is that millennial parents have different expectations for their kids' learning. And I think that gives us the opportunity to create some really incredible companies and really incredible change. I might even go a step further and say that the largest company in the world in 2030 could be an education company. And you're seeing a lot of very large companies being created in China. And I think that that's just going to lead to ecosystem network effects. Like VIP Kid is doing an incredible job of teaching a large number of Chinese kids English, and I think they're going to want to learn more than English, and I think they're going to take classes in out school when they're a little bit older.
Yeah.
So I just see a tremendous opportunity.
Perfect. So then we've got a minute left. Parting shots. Best decision, worst decision you've each made in your companies.
I'll go first. Best decision, we hired an awesome CTO. We're a technology company. We kind of need that. So our CTO is like was the head of innovation at Samsung, you know, PhD comp sci from Stanford, like all the credentials, and he backed them all up. So that was the best thing I think we did as far as creating a technology that works and is scalable. Worst decision was maybe my first CTO. Before that, didn't achieve those things, and maybe take it a little longer to get there.
Awesome.
I'd say the best decision we made was focusing on the small group format, just because of the advantages it provides and engagement and the financial benefits to both parents and teachers. And I mean, relatedly, I think you know, the worst decision was just not doing that quickly enough, and then you know, being a little bit slow to hire. We're a bit behind the curve.
Yeah, it's hard.
Brent?
Best decision going into business with my wife. She's really great. Anybody who's met her, and no, she's just been a fantastic business partner. It's been really helpful to have a real educator who's, you know, right connected with this. Tough to say a worst decision. I think we're just now starting to sell directly into schools, and I think that was an opportunity that's been sitting with us for a few years now. So timing on that maybe could have been earlier.
best decision was my co-founder as well. She is awesome. She also studied CS at Stanford, so we're like same brain. And then my worst decision, I think we're still a young company, so we make a lot of wonky decisions often.
Wonky's good.
But yeah, I think, gosh, I don't know, probably like building the first version of our website myself after, that's probably a bad idea, yeah, but.
Well, you know what they say, if you're not embarrassed by your first version,
Yeah.
you move too slow.
Fair,
So,
fair,
yeah.
yeah.
Perfect. How about a round of applause for our company?